Hello, everyone. We're going to keep letting people into the meeting as they arrive, but we're going to start. And we want you to know that we are recording the meeting, so you know that. Well, thank you for joining us today. We are thrilled that you're here. We think this is a very exciting topic. We'd like to welcome you all. We are the Nevada Caregivers Coalition's Conversation with Caregivers. This is our new monthly forum for caregivers so caregivers can gain sorry, I'm having trouble with my words, can gain information and to share their concerns with us. The coalition works to create a community awareness and to change public policy on the issues facing all caregivers and their families. I am Mary Liverati, your host. I'm a member of the Nevada Caregivers Coalition. We are a group of organizations, agencies, businesses, and individuals who provide care to individuals and loved ones across the lifespan. We would like to thank our sponsor. I don't know why I'm not, oh, there we go. I was gonna say I wasn't seeing the slides. So we want to thank our sponsor for today's event, AARP Nevada. AARP is also a member of our coalition. Be sure to check out all the information and events that they have on their website, aarp.org. Every November, in recognition of National Family Caregiver Month, we host a recognition celebration event for Nevada caregivers. Information about the event will be available soon on our website. The Nevada Caregivers Coalition has a website that we encourage you to visit at nevadacaregiverscoalition.com. On the website, you will find our blog, a calendar of events each month, and how to join our monthly meetings. We also have a Facebook page and encourage you to check it out. We meet on the second Wednesday of each month from 11:30 to 1 p.m. on Zoom currently to discuss current issues facing caregivers. Our next meeting will be on Wednesday, July 7th. If you're not a member, we encourage you to consider joining us. And it's very easy. You simply send us your information on our contact form, which is available on our website, or let us know in the chat today so we can reach out to you after our event. A few reminders on Zoom etiquette before we start. We will have time for questions after our speakers conclude their remarks. But if you have a question, in the meantime, please use the chat feature to ask your question or to make a comment. We will be monitoring that chat while the presentation is going on. Please mute your microphone unless you are asking a question. If you'd like to save the chat, simply click on the 3 gray dots in the top right corner of your screen and of the chat box and click on Save Chat. Now, we have discovered that people that are on mobile devices sometimes have trouble saving the chat. But if you're on a computer, you should be able to do that. However, if you do have any trouble with your internet connection or questions about it, just leave the meeting and sign back in. We find a lot of times that helps people get connected if they're having trouble hearing or there's some problem. But if you continue to have other tech issues and would like assistance, send a private chat to Marcia O'Malley. She is with Mindful Media Services and is managing our meeting today. So thank you, Marcia, for doing that. We appreciate it. So we're very excited today because June, believe it or not, is Alzheimer's and Brain Awareness Month. So we've invited our local chapter of the Alzheimer's Association to speak today, and they have some great speakers. The Alzheimer's Association leads the way to end Alzheimer's and all other dementia by accelerating global research, driving risk reduction and early detection, and maximizing quality care and support. Our speakers today are Denise Hund, who is a family care associate, and Ariana Myers, who is a community educator from the Alzheimer's Association. Denise and Ariana are sharing their Effective Communication Strategies program that provides practical information and resources to help dementia caregivers learn to decode verbal messages from early to late stage care. So go ahead, Denise.
Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for having us. It's really a pleasure to see everyone. I'm seeing some very familiar names. I've missed seeing you out in the community, and we appreciate having the opportunity to present today on a very important topic, as we always get asked, as people change through a dementia diagnosis, whether it be Alzheimer's or others. The foundation of that is really being able to continue to connect. And so our community educator, Ariana Myers, is helping us today with the presentation, and there'll be time for questions and review of the Alzheimer's Association services at the end. So Ariana, thank you so much, and please proceed.
Thank you, Denise, and hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. Okay, hopefully everyone can see that all right. So welcome to the Effective Communication Strategies Program, sponsored by the Alzheimer's Association. Today, we're going to explore how communication takes place when someone is living with dementia. And by the end of the program, you should be able to explain the communication changes that take place throughout the course of the disease, decode the verbal and behavioral messages that a person with dementia is trying to deliver. And we're going to try and give you some practical strategies to connect and communicate at each stage of the disease. So before we start, we want to really understand that communication is more than just talking and listening. It's really about sending and receiving messages. And you can do that not just with words, but through your attitude, your tone of voice, your facial expressions, your body language, etc. So communication, really think of it as a way that for us to try to express who we are and how we relate to each other. Now, as the brain changes with Alzheimer's disease or other dementia-related progressive diseases, people will lose the ability to speak as well as decode language in the usual ways. So the better we understand these changes, the better we can connect with people living with the disease throughout the course of the disease. So we really think about Alzheimer's in three different stages: the early or mild stage, the middle or moderate stage, and the late or severe stage. As people, again, have the disease, they're going to lose their ability to communicate and their thoughts and feelings with words. And they will, along with that, also lose the ability to understand the words that others are speaking to them. That said, they're going to maintain throughout the course of the disease a sense of self. And that means that the elements of their personality that make that person unique will remain a part of him or her throughout the disease. So what we like to say is that connecting with the person's self is the key to effective communication, and then staying connected and giving that person a voice as the disease progresses. In the early stage, there may be only just a few noticeable changes in the person's ability to communicate. There may not be really even anything that you notice at all. And so what we want you to do at that stage of the game is really try to ask the person how they would like to be helped in the later stages of the disease while they've got the opportunity to express themselves with words. The language abilities diminish then as the disease progresses. And so by the time we're in the moderate stage, the person is going to be progressing from really easy conversation to more trying to rely on emotions and five senses to connect, and perhaps communicating through their behaviors more than their words. Now, as a care partner or a caregiver, you're the one who's going to have to adjust the way that you communicate in order to maintain communication through the disease. Remember that the essence of the person continues, so respect who they are as an adult and adjust your communication based on what's meaningful to the person at that time, no matter what the stage of the disease. Going into the late stages, you are going to be moving away from using words and relying more on body language and five senses to connect. Okay, so the rest of the presentation is divided then into these three stages: early, mid, and late. So in the early stage, as we mentioned before, you may or may not see changes in the way the person communicates. For some, there may be a shift in their ease with words or conversations. Some of the most common changes you may notice are going to include what you see on this slide. So difficulty finding the right words. And as a result of that, it may take longer for someone to speak or respond. Again, as a result of that, you may find that someone starts to withdraw from conversations since they're having difficulty staying, participating in the conversation. And then another big change that you might see is just struggling with some more complex tasks like decision-making or problem solving. Now, again, whether you're noticing changes in the way the person speaks or not, communication in this stage is really crucial. This is the period in which everyone is adjusting to the diagnosis and they're all having thoughts and feelings about the changes ahead. Keep in mind that denial is part of the disease for some people. Others may just be overwhelmed with emotions of coming to grips with the diagnosis. The important thing is to come to terms with the diagnosis and these emotions that we're all feeling by talking together and expressing your connection. And that's going to help you both accept the diagnosis and move forward and discover new ways to live positive, fulfilling lives. And just continuing to communicate throughout this process will also bring closeness between the person with the disease and the caregiver. And that's going to help everyone adjust more easily as the disease progresses. Okay, this is our first video. This is Martha Tierney. She's the Associate Director of Volunteer Research Programs for the Alzheimer's Association's National Office, and she's going to tell us about how to be helpful in the early stage.
Communicating in the early stages of dementia with the person with the disease is important. At that time, you still have language as a tool, so you can learn things about what they might prefer as the disease progresses. For example, as the disease progresses, a person might have difficulty finding words. Caregivers often struggle to know what to do in that moment. Early on in the disease, you can ask. You can say, if you ever have trouble coming up with a word, would you rather that I jump in and give you the word, or do you want me to wait and allow you some time so you can find it on your own?
Okay, so as Martha mentioned, one of the best ways to be sure you're offering the help with communication that a person needs is to ask them directly. So for example, as Martha mentioned, if they're struggling to find the right word, ask them whether it feels better if you were to supply the word, or would they prefer for you to wait patiently. Also, it's going to help if you keep your sentences direct and straightforward. That's going to help the other person avoid feeling lost in the conversations. A shorter sentence can make the meaning more clear, and really try to avoid long explanations. Try to take your cue from the person, and be always careful not to be talking down to him or her. And it may take that person longer to find words or put thoughts together and express them. So get into the habit of allowing extra time for conversations so no one feels pressured or rushed. Conversational needs are going to change over time. And in this early stage, the person with dementia needs to have his or her voice heard. So you can facilitate that when you try to meet them where they are today, regardless of the stage of the disease. And very important, be sure to include the person in any conversation that they want to be included in, especially if the subject matter is regarding changes or decisions that will have an effect on his or her future. If you're including the person, that's going to be very empowering and engaging. It will allow their wishes to be respected, and it's going to help reinforce that relationship and closeness that you want to continue to carry forward through further stages. Some things to keep in mind as well. Don't make assumptions about a person's ability to communicate because they simply because they have an Alzheimer's or another dementia diagnosis. Everyone is affected differently. Everyone progresses differently. The best way to find out how someone is doing is to speak directly to them. You can also explore which method of communication is most comfortable for them. So they may enjoy writing letters. They may be more comfortable talking on the phone, or nowadays with Zoom calls, maybe that would be more comfortable to have a video element in addition to the phone conversation. Or some people may just prefer to speak in person. Whatever happens, it's okay to laugh. Humor can lighten the mood, and it does make communication easier. But whatever's going on, it's hard to talk about this stuff. It's really important to be honest and frank about your feelings, don't pull away. Your friendship and support are very important to the person with the dementia diagnosis. Okay, now we're going to talk about the middle stage of the disease. Many of the changes in communication that happen take place during this middle stage of the disease. So if you notice certain changes in the early stage, they're probably going to be much more pronounced in the middle stage. And it's going to be some of the things you see on this list. So increased difficulty finding right words. This often results in using familiar words repeatedly because they're sort of easier to access. It may also be that the person's very short-term memory is being affected at this point, and they may not remember having just said something a moment before. If somebody isn't able to find a word, they may invent some different way to describe it. So like can't remember the word for watch, but they could call it a hand clock. So you may get some of these unusual descriptions rather than the actual term. And as things progress, the person may easily lose their train of thought. Again, similarly, the more difficult it becomes to find words and communicate, you may notice that somebody's going to speak much less frequently. And again, a hallmark of the middle stage of the disease is starting to see more communication through behavior rather than words. So changes in the brain make tracking and decoding words more difficult. So people begin to use behavior to communicate more often in the middle stage of the disease. We're going to discuss the adjustments that you can make to help you continue to connect with the person living with Alzheimer's as we go through this stage. But before we move on, do note that some physical conditions and medications can affect a person's ability to communicate. So when we talk about the progression of Alzheimer's or other dementia, generally the diseases progress sort of slowly and steadily. And if you notice a sudden decline in a person's ability to communicate that really took place overnight, you really should consult a doctor. There may be a medical issue that needs to be addressed right away. One very typical example is urinary tract infections. People with Alzheimer's are prone to UTIs, and the symptoms of a UTI can very much look like dementia. So again, the thing to look for is if there's been a sudden change overnight, take the person to the doctor. It may be that there's an infection or medication interaction that can be cleared up medically and bring the person back to the same level of functioning as before the sudden change. Okay, here's our next video. Beverly's going to share some advice she gives to caregivers as a support group facilitator.
I would advise couples, and I usually do advise the caregiver who comes to the group and is caring for a spouse, that you take your time. Always count to 3 before you respond, because it gives you time to think about your answer and what's going on. Generally, in a marital dispute, it's quick. It's back and forth. You're quick to give an answer. When they've been diagnosed, to sit back and say, okay, you're supposed to be the one that's reasonable here. Let's change how we do this, because there's only one thing you can control, and that's you. You cannot control them in their process.
Okay, so we talked about how communication takes place through more than just words. It's very much your tone of voice and your attitude are something that the person's going to pick up on. So when you are trying to communicate with someone in the middle stages, approach them gently. Try to approach from the front, and there's a good reason for that. As we get into progression with the disease, people tend to lose their peripheral vision. So if you're coming from behind or from the side, you actually run a higher risk of startling that person. Whereas if you approach from the front, you have a better chance of them understanding that you're coming toward them and not having a startled reaction. And as you do that, identify yourself, approach from the front, try to be at eye level. So try not to be sort of looking down on them. You can imagine that that could be very intimidating if someone is sitting in a chair and you're standing above them, looking down at them. And announce who you are. So say your own name. Hi, Dad, it's your daughter, Sue. And that's going to help orient them to who you are and the fact that you want to talk to them, and it's going to get their attention. Sometimes using touch is going to help too. It's just going to show that you care, even if somebody doesn't understand the words that you're saying. Whatever you do, don't criticize, correct, or impose your perspective. It's going to backfire most of the time. You're not going to be able to convince someone else of something that's in your reality and not theirs. So pay attention again to your facial expression, your tone of voice, be calm and patient. The person can feel either your tension or your patient understanding. And if you're being gentle and calm and understanding, you're more likely to get that reaction reflected back to you. And finally, again, this is a habit that you'll need to get into, but take the time to communicate. So give yourself and the person that you're talking to enough time to respond, interact, and connect. In the next video, Rebecca talks about adjusting her own thoughts and responses when her mother repeated herself.
She could sense my frustration because occasionally I would lose my patience and I would bark at her. Why are you asking me that question again? I just answered that question 2 minutes ago. And then she would get frustrated because, you know, she was very old school and she's like, don't disrespect me. And I didn't ask you that question 2 minutes ago. It's a new question. So phase 2 of our relationship was like, okay, that's a new question. I'll answer it again.
So there's a couple of pretty important takeaways from that last video. One of them is that this repetition and repeating, using the same words over and over again, like I just did here, is one of the most common behaviors. You're very, very likely to encounter it. And it can be really frustrating. So we always say we want you to understand that this is going to be part of the situation. In reality, it can be very difficult for a family caregiver to always try and maintain that patience when you're repeating yourself over and over again. But just keep in mind that the person is not repeating themselves or forgetting things on purpose. It's really due to physical changes in their brain. So that brings us to our next point, which is that we really want to try and connect with the person in their reality. Really try to take a little time to see the world as he or she may be seeing it from that moment. When you do try to see things from the other person's perspective, their behavior might become more understandable to you. So again, due to the changes that are happening in the brain, the person is probably not going to be able to see your perspective. So you as the caregiver are going to have to be the one who needs to use respect and empathy to see the world through their eyes. So joining their reality is key to giving that person his or her say, and it provides a soothing reassurance. So to do that, you can take the steps that are listed out on this slide. Listen to try to figure out what the person wants or needs. It means pay attention to both their words and their behavior. They might be saying something about their feelings or needs, but they might be feeling something else on a deeper level that also needs attention from you. So, for example, I can still drive just fine may also contain the feeling, I don't want to give up my independence. Don't take that away from me. Or something stronger, I stop taking over my life. I hate it. May actually reflect a deeper feeling of, I hate this disease and I don't understand why I can't do what I always used to be able to. So the most important thing to do in those situations is to let the person know that you understand what they might be feeling, whether they're expressing those feelings through words, behavior, or both. And try to address their questions or any issue that they may bring up, but try and keep it brief and to the point. You're going to have a better chance of being understood if you do not get long-winded in your explanation. And then most importantly, do respond to the emotions behind the behavior or the concern. So if the person is communicating with words, you might say, you seem sad. Do you feel sad? And then wait for a response. If the person says yes, you can try to guess the cause, as in, do you miss the way things used to be? If the person says yes to this as well, you could add, I do too. And in that sense, you've made a connection and you've joined their reality. If the person is communicating through behavior, try and see, it's easier said than done, but try and see if you can identify and speak about the emotion behind the behavior. And that's going to take a lot of personal insight and the better you know the person, the easier this is going to be for you. But as an example, if someone's rummaging through possessions, that could be a way of communicating boredom, or maybe they need something that they're trying to find. There's lots of other behaviors out there. And in fact, there's a whole presentation from the Alzheimer's Association that goes into more detail about the different kinds of behaviors that you encounter in the middle stage of the disease. It's called Understanding Dementia-Related Behaviors. And so if this is something you're running into, then you could consider watching that presentation as well. Finally, then, only after you've responded to the emotions, you can also try reassuring and redirecting that person by encouraging them to do something that may shift their attention and their behavior. So you could say, I'm so glad to be here with you today. Let's go for a walk outside. And that way you're gradually moving the person away from feeling sad to doing something active that can lift his or her spirits. So keep it slow and basic, take your time and be patient. The more you slow down, the less resistance you're going to encounter because the person won't feel rushed, and you can avoid some frustration that way. Use short sentences, basic words, and speak clearly and be specific. You have other things you can tap into other helping tools to get your point across rather than just speaking with words. So mnemonic gestures, right? Visual cues and gestures, gesturing and pointing as you're talking, but do try to avoid making sudden movements that might startle the person. You can write things down. You can use reminder notes. You can use calendars and labels and lists. To remind the person of where things belong or what something is called or who a person is. Like you can label the back of a photo to help someone keep track of the names of the relationships from earlier in their life. One thing you can do that can make it easier is to try and offer answers sort of embedded in your questions. So don't answer open-ended questions like, what would you like for lunch? You can make it an easier question to answer by saying, Bill, I'm making sandwiches for lunch. Would you like ham or turkey? And then the person can choose one or the other. And they'll often choose the last one that was mentioned. But if they can't, if the two choices is too much, you can also make a suggestion. How about ham? Again, we mentioned this before, you're going to need to get used to repeating information and questions, and just be ready to do that. No matter how many reminders you put out there, you're still probably going to have to repeat information. It may be that the person wasn't able to decode the information the first time we gave it to them, so you have to try again. Repetition can help. It may also be that literally their short-term memory is not functioning well and they've forgotten what you just said. It can help to try and turn negatives into positives. So trying to get someone into a shower can often be a task that encounters a lot of resistance. So one thing you could do, rather than just announcing it's time for your shower, which may trigger the resistance, you can attach it to something positive. So say, let's go get you cleaned up for the day, so you'll be ready for Cindy's visit this afternoon. And then one thing to make sure you avoid is quizzing the person. So again, if they can't remember, they can't remember. And asking harder and harder is really just, or even asking them to try harder to remember is going to lead to frustration. It's really much more respectful and helpful just to give the person the information they need again, if necessary, along with continued reminders as you go forward. Okay, so we want to respond empathetically and reassure the person, let them know that you're there and listening and that you hear their concerns. The facts of the matter are much less important than the person's feelings and their view of reality. Whatever they're feeling and thinking is very real to them, and it may not match your reality. So responding to feelings first can help avoid resistance. Provide reassurance that you're together, you're safe, and you're there to help. Let them know that you hear and understand their thoughts and feelings that they're experiencing. And really, as long as there's not any safety issue, agree and go with the flow. Find common ground wherever possible. So if they want to go outside for a walk, if that's something that can be done safely at that time, then go ahead and do that. Make any adjustments to the situation, like if you need to change the environment to make it safer. But once you've addressed the feelings, validated their feelings, then you can try to redirect the person to another activity if you need to. Okay, so that is the middle stage of the disease. Again, I just want to enforce that the main hallmark of the middle stage of the disease is more expression or more communication through behaviors rather than words. And again, I would encourage you to sign up for and watch the Understanding Dementia-Related Behaviors presentation if you're able to find the time to do that. Now we're going to talk about the late stage of the disease. The changes that have happened by this stage of the disease are very profound. The person may only be using a few words, but that doesn't change the fact that they still have a need to connect and communicate. But at this point, they've lost so many functions. You may feel a strong urge to do something. Just what we want you to understand is that at this stage of the disease, your presence and connection with the person are much more important than doing something specific for them. Something else always to try to remember is that this person is an adult with a sense of self, and that's going to continue all the way throughout the course of the disease. And you can connect with that person's sense of self by remembering their history and respecting their preferences. The goal is to help the person feel content and happy whenever possible. And keep talking. Use familiar words, names, and phrases, and poems, passages, songs. Whether you get a direct response from the person or not, the sound of your voice helps maintain the connection between you. And in this stage, using the 5 senses is a great way to connect with the person. So we'll talk about that in the next few slides, but touch, sight, sound, smell, taste. If the words aren't there, you can tap into those 5 senses for your communication. Okay, in this video, Sandra is going to talk about connecting with her mother in the late stage of the disease.
I know that my mom feels aggravated. I know that she feels alone. I know that she feels confused, and I know on any given day, I don't know if I've made it better for her. I try. In these later stages, I've come to recognize that being really aware of the 5 senses is really important. Touch seems to give her a great deal of comfort. I know when I come over, I'm going to brush her hair all the time. My husband noted to me recently, he said, you should see the look on your mom's face when you're brushing her hair. She's just happy. She's just happy. She doesn't say a lot. And I do it for a long period of time. I comb it, I braid it, I do funny things with it, but it just allows me to just be with her in a way that makes her feel comfortable.
So I really love that video with Sandra talking about how she communicated with her mom through touch. And I think it really goes a long way to giving you a sense of what the communication can be like during the late stage of the disease. So, anything where the hands can be feeling different senses, different types of things is going to be a form of communication, and especially anything where you can provide a sense of human touch. So holding a person's hand, stroking their arm or back, or really a hand lotion, massage, it can be very, very soothing. So just gentle pressure on the hands with a nice lotion can provide a great sense of connection when you're in the late stage of the disease. Connecting through sight. So keep in mind, I mentioned that there tends to be a loss of peripheral vision, and there may be some other issues. The person may have macular degeneration or other loss of sight. So as you get into further and further into the disease, it's going to require much brighter or more vivid colors in order for the person to see distinct shapes clearly. For example, if you're looking at setting the table for someone to eat, then really try and find a placemat that is a very distinct color. So there's a big contrast between, say, a white plate with a dark colored placemat behind it, so that it's very clear when someone is looking down that, oh, this is a plate on a placemat, I should be eating now. That kind of signal to the person of what should be happening there. You know, all of the suggestions here are something you can explore. Going outdoors and sitting by an open window, feel the sunshine, see people and pets walking by. All of those things are nice things to look at during the late stage of the disease. So using sounds and music are actually some of the most powerful ways to connect in the late stage of the disease. If you have never watched the film Alive Inside, I highly recommend that you do so. People, when they lose their memory with Alzheimer's, they tend to lose the more recent memory first, and then the memory loss kind of progresses backward. They retain early memories the longest, and music is heavily connected to our emotional centers. So listening to familiar music that someone has listened to their whole life can really have an amazing effect, and really bring someone who doesn't appear to be responsive at all, can bring them out of their shell. And you know, ballet dancers will start to try to dance again. Musicians will liven up and get very excited about when they hear music from earlier stages of their life. But another, I guess, in this category, we've mentioned it a few times, the gentle tone of your own voice is also going to be a great way to communicate in the late stage of the disease, especially if you've been able to maintain this connection throughout the disease progression. The sense of smell is one of our most basic senses. Keep in mind that smell will tend to diminish with age, and even more so with the disease progression. So for someone to pick up on a scent, it needs to be a stronger smell than you might ordinarily consider. But with that in mind, try to keep in mind that if somebody has allergies, you need to avoid scents that might aggravate those allergies. So look for something that has a strong enough sense, can provide a feeling of warmth and help, like good food that they used to like to eat, but keep in mind any allergies and try not to trigger those. Well connected to smell is the sense of taste. So again, well into the late stage, people living with dementia enjoy tasting their favorite foods, especially if they could smell them cooking at the same time. But again, the important thing to understand here is that as the disease progresses, the ability to swallow may diminish. So you really need to be aware of where the person is in the disease, and avoid feeding them something if choking is going to be a hazard. Okay, so just summarizing, we want to maximize our connectedness with the person with dementia, try to understand what is and isn't possible, stay up to date with the latest information. You can do that through the Alzheimer's Association website, and by attending workshops and conferences. Try to know and accept the functional limitations of the person, so that you can set realistic expectations. Remember, they're an adult, they have a sense of self, that should always be respected. Use your feelings to connect with them, and that you do convey your mood through your actions and your tone of voice. The person is going to pick up on that, and they're going to reflect that back. So try to stay focused on positive feelings for the person. Again, I know that's sometimes easier said than done, but it's something we want to always try and walk into the situation with a positive feeling if we can. Demonstrate your caring, listen, observe, try to decode what they're communicating, and really try to join their reality, and so you can better understand what's needed and how to intervene. Okay, in this next video, we're going to talk about another very important part, which is caring for yourself as a caregiver. This is Dr. Sam Fazio, the Director of Special Projects for the Alzheimer's Association's national office.
Taking care of yourself while you care for somebody with the disease not only impacts your own health, but it really can impact the person with the disease. So, for example, if you're not getting enough sleep, you might be easily irritated, which will then sort of spill over to your interactions with the person with the disease and maybe being short with them, which then might cause them to get frustrated. So it's not only important to take care of yourself for your own health, but really for you to really be a good caregiver.
Okay, on that very important note, I'm going to turn it over to Denise Hund, who is going to take us forward through the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Ariana. Such a great job on that presentation. And I want to let you know that many of you are very familiar with the Alzheimer's Association. We're here to help. We're here to help any care partner or person living with a diagnosis, Alzheimer's or other, to live well, effectively, to be, living life to the best and the fullest potential. So on our website at alz.org, if you haven't seen it, it's a wealth of information. The Alzheimer's Navigator is a good resource for families who are helping a loved one living with a diagnosis to connect. So you create your own portfolio and share with family and friends. This has been such a difficult year too, to really find out, really, I haven't seen my mom for a year and a half. So what's really going on? So that point of entry is, this is where we are right now. These are the changes that we see. Who can help and how? So the Navigator is really good about that. Our community resource finder is being able for people to really go deep and deeper into the caregiving issues that they might have and to ask questions. So it might be, I have a sister or a husband with FTD or Lewy bodies. That looks a little bit different. So the community resource finder will help connect people and link them in to going further into the care planning. Also, we have a lot of information. You're hearing a lot about benefits of early diagnosis and self-advocacy. So a lot of those resources are really for the person that's living with a diagnosis. I've got young onset, or I have early symptoms. I want to connect with others. Our safety center, or also connected, I really like that. It's a message board. That's really a starting point sometimes for people to message across the nation. I have a dementia Alzheimer's diagnosis, and you can create a community that way through the message board, or I care for my spouse, or I care for my sister, or I'm an LGBT community. I have a late stage caregiving. So the message board is really a good way to kind of take a look and get information from others, the same way a good support group works. You talking to your peers. There's a solution board within All's Connected that I like a lot, that takes you directly to the point of maybe 10 different common situations that might come up, and it navigates you directly to answering questions about driving, in particular safety. We know everyone who's living with a diagnosis maybe at some point might have more safety issues. How do we address that? How do we keep them independent? So the Caregiver Center, the All's Connected, can really help you as a caregiver stay connected with that. We know support groups are extremely important, as well as education programs such as this one. You could be connected with that on our website and watch more of our specific programs. We have, as Ariana mentioned, behavior strategies. How do we really de-escalate something before it even happens if someone is feeling uncomfortable? We have education programs for early symptoms, mid symptoms, late symptoms. Commonly, that education program is for the person that's living with a diagnosis to help a plan for their life and be involved with that. When we were in, we've been transitioning since March of 2020 at the Alzheimer's Association. We didn't stop our support groups. We did not stop our education opportunities, and that still continues. So you can find that on our training center. You can find out more about what's happening locally, not only through this 800 number that you see if you're not familiar with it. Our 24/7 helpline number is available 24/7. It might be something simple like, I know I saw a class listed, where is that? and you'll get an answer. Or it might be, I really need to talk to someone. I work in the community. I'm a care partner. We need to take care of the care partners, as he touched on at the end. That caregiver stress is real. And sometimes we'll hear, nope, it's not my dad that's in the hospital, it's mom, from not taking care of herself. So we want to make sure that that's addressed through availability of our support groups, through the 800 line. Middle of the night, you can talk to a clinical social worker, and that's really important to pass on to others. If it's something local that we need to follow up on, I will see that. One of our local staff members will see that. Okay, we got this phone call in the middle of the night. We'll address that, see how you're doing. What routing of access to resources do you need? At this point, I want to make sure that everyone knows that the Alzheimer's Association has a respite grant available through ADSD. You can connect with that through our 800 number and find out more about it, or through our local office number or Alzheimer's Association website in Nevada. How do I apply for the respite grant? And you'll be connected with one of our local managers, or we have a grant manager that will help kind of make sure that that's in place. You must live with the person you're caring for, and there needs to be a dementia diagnosis to qualify. Doesn't matter what income level is. And then we'll say, how do you want to use this grant? And we'll make sure that you have access to that. That other portion of access to communities, we know that every state is different. Chicago is our home office. It's all navigated by your local to your region, by your zip code. Here's the support groups. Here's classes coming up. Here's access to resources in your area that are specific to caregiving and other support services. And this is a big overview. We know that there's lots and lots of information there, and you can talk to us on the phone if you're more comfortable looking at the website and then connecting with us, finding out through our local office, how do I apply for the respite grant? We're very happy to do that with you and for you. And just real quickly, October 2nd is our Walk to End Alzheimer's, and I'm seeing familiar faces that have been involved in the walk. That's one of our local resources. It goes locally to care and support. People like myself will get you those education opportunities. We'll continue to create that virtually for as long as we need to until we transition to in-person events again. If you were involved in the Walk to End Alzheimer's last year, you know that we did it. We still made it happen, but it was walk in your pod, walk through the parks, walk in your community. Now we're going to have a sort of hybrid version of that this year at Sparks Marina. So look, when you look more about that, let us know and join a group, join another group, or create your own team. We just had Longest Day, and that's a wonderful way of kind of a self-generated event fundraiser where one of my co-workers made pickles and sold pickles, or I'm on a cycle group and I'm going to raise money that way. So it's really specific. We tell everyone it's a good idea to join a trial match if you haven't, for clinical trials. That's been a lot in the news lately about the clinical trial that was approved this past couple of weeks. You can find out more about that on our website. It helps us to have people join clinical trials so that there's more people involved. You'll see a lot about Alzheimer's Impact Movement. Mary is a great supporter of everything that we do. And we know having a voice is a nonpartisan issue. There's been a lot more research dollars going to that. So there's some people in the last statistics of people that are living in Nevada, and more people are moving here. So please be sure that I'm seeing some questions coming in, and I know we're on kind of a short, I'll see if I can answer some of this. Oh,
Denise,
question.
I just want to say that we're anxious to have questions answered. So if we need to go a little bit long,
okay,
we will do that today, an extra 5 or 10 minutes if people have questions.
Okay.
Anybody that needs to leave, please feel free to leave if you have
and
to.
You can always talk to the Alzheimer's Association. I saw an earlier one from Cheryl, and then I'm having a little bit difficulty seeing the rest. Cheryl, regarding like assistive devices and help and support when people commonly, and where there is some research, and you can see this on our website too, hearing loss creating more of a dementia increase, right? If we don't hear, if you've ever had a bad cold and you're not hearing well, you're like, I am lost, right? So it starts with the right providers for visual checkups and hearing checkups, and the Alzheimer's Association through Alz Connected. That's part of what we do, is direct you towards specialists that know a little bit more about the field. So for instance, if it's a visual problem, let's determine where that's really coming from. There is a cortical Alzheimer's version of the diagnosis that starts in cortical. So it starts with your vision. But if someone's not trained in figuring that out, you want to make sure you're going to a specialist that knows a little bit more about that. Hearing loss, one of the challenges really for someone that's living with a diagnosis is understanding how to adjust their device, how to keep track of their hearing aids. That can be a big challenge. So again, going to someone that knows the field, that can adjust accordingly based on what that person is able to do for themselves and understand. It might be adjusting your home. So the hearing aids aren't working, so we're going to need to find more visual cues in the house, or a whiteboard where we can write down what's going on next or what's happening for the day, or labeling, not only with words that can sometimes be a little bit of a challenge, but also it might be a visual, like here's the bathroom, here's the arrow to the bathroom, so that people can self-direct in their own home. Another way to kind of address keeping that independence and making adjustments as needed might be to ask the primary doctor, can you refer me to an occupational or speech therapist that can help me as the care partner, or me living with some earlier symptoms, how to stay independent through adjustments in their home. So it might be an OT's home visit. It might be a speech therapist setting up a dialogue for the care partner and the person that's living with the diagnosis to really self-direct how to stay independent and how to make adjustments that might be needed along the way. Long-winded version, but I think, it really starts with a provider that knows the community that they're working with. If it's a dementia-related diagnosis, you need to really look at the specialists that can help with the field. I'm having a little trouble reading the top. There's a question.
So we've got one here, Denise, I can read for
Yeah,
you
sure.
from Marta. She asks, how can you convince someone who you think might have dementia to go to the doctor for cognitive checkup?
Yeah, a good program to watch is Difficult Conversations. I teach that class the second Friday of every month, I think, so far. And then, so this really breaks this down. So part of it is we're on the same team. That Difficult Conversation course that we have goes through 3 difficult things to get to, for sometimes that is challenging: getting someone to the doctor, getting to the right team for the proper diagnosis. So it gives you language in that particular presentation. We're a team. Oh, let's find out what this is. Maybe you're not telling the full truth. It's like, well, we need to go through to the Medicare wellness check. Let's go together. Partners going together. So sometimes, depending upon how you use that language, when you use that language, that difficult Dementia Conversations course really reviews that deeper. The same with it reviews driving as well, when to stop driving, what to do, how to make a plan. And then the third part of that is legal and financial planning. So for more specifics, I would kind of really look at that and say, okay, I've got some tips. You can also look that up on our website. It's search how to get somebody to the doctor. So it gets more specific.
Great advice, Denise. So we have another question from Bridget. She says, any tips for how to communicate procedures like taking a shower, changing clothes, or toileting with someone who is late middle stage, who does not understand any verbal instruction and gets very frustrated and angry?
It starts, I think, really just that self-care. First of all, we want to make sure that we're keeping choices in place for as long as we can, and we're making things really simple. Like Ariana mentioned, even just choosing lunch. You're asking me too many questions. So it starts with being very specific about seasonal wear. So clear out the closet with anything that's winter, make things very easy, lay things out. Make sure you have the proper equipment in the house. So if you need a home check on that, you might want to see if you can get an OT in there. Definitely a shower chair. People's skin gets really sensitive. They have a fear of falling. Getting scented soaps and things all ready to go. Overhead shower wand. Making sure that the bathroom and anything that's ready for getting ready for the day, that you're not just walking in there and now I have to get the soap and the towel. And, you know, we're doing this one step at a time. And again, it goes down to, if you're really getting your heels in, does it matter? Maybe we'll do the shower tomorrow morning and try over again, but it's really simplifying things, maybe giving a reason behind it. Oh, you smell so good when I've got this special soap that you like, you're putting that positive. We're getting you all handsome because we're going to have a Zoom meeting with the grandkids. We don't need to shower every day like we're used to, maybe not so much in COVID, some people weren't. So it's like, maybe if we get really cleaned up two times a week rather than every day, especially if it's feeling stressful. And there's also a lot more hygiene products now that are more available to keep people clean. We know urinary tract infections can be a real problem. So people keeping them clean as much as possible using products. And sometimes just like, I know you're upset, but we're getting ready for your grandson's coming over, or just letting it go and approaching later. Maybe people forgot that they were so upset, and it's a lot of visual cueing. You're becoming an actor or an actress. Like Ariana said, it's so important to slow things down. I tell this with people that are working in residential communities. You may seem like you've got 20 people to watch over or do these things, but if you take 5 extra seconds and give them the visual cue and a thank you, or if you know something about that person, or you're a veteran, thank you for your service. We appreciate you. Oh, you know, you look so pretty when we put on this blue sweater. It's ready to go. So it's kind of feeling out the frustration, keeping things simple, best time of day without distractions. Someone's going to seem cold might feel cold when we're like, I'm burning up, man, it's so hot. But you just watch that person's body language. Are they uncomfortable? Why? How can I make that adjustment for you?
All right, Denise, we've got a couple more questions here that we'll try to squeeze in here. The next one is from Deanna. She says, how is someone's decision-making indicative of early dementia?
You know, when I like, or if you haven't seen it, 10 warning signs is one of the core programs that we put together that kind of outlines what's normal aging, what doesn't seem quite right, are things disrupting their daily life, are people struggling with things that they did not used to struggle with. And as you look at that as kind of a template, because frequently the person that's having some struggles that you might be noticing, but they don't notice, you need to kind of use that as a template. It's like, let's talk about this. Has anyone else seen this? You know, someone else close. Doesn't seem like a real broad or great thing yet, but something doesn't seem quite right. And if something doesn't seem quite right, it probably isn't. And if you watch getting people to a doctor and get them to the right clinician, it's really that team effort, having the right documents, you know, having that right language available for those first visits. But if something that doesn't seem quite right, it probably isn't. So look at the 10 warning signs. That kind of gives you, not everybody's going to have all 10 signs, but a handful of them and a change, it needs to be addressed.
That's great, Denise. It looks like that was our last question, but I wanted to make a note. Riley Franco from the AARP, our today's sponsor, said that we could all join their team for the Alzheimer's walk. So if anyone's interested, be sure and reach out to Riley.
And they do have teams in the north and the south. Well, we'd like to thank Denise and Ariana for being here today and giving us this excellent information and resources that are available to us. And we also want to thank our sponsor, AARP. You can see their website is listed at the bottom, aarp.org/Nevada. You can find out about upcoming events that they will be having and resources that they also have for caregivers. I'd also like to thank Marcia O'Malley with Mindful Media Services and Becky Contos for their technical assistance at our meeting today. We have a great committee working together to plan all these upcoming conversations with caregivers, including our chair, Deanna Hearn, Lisa Davis from Renown Health, Cheryl Donnell from the Nevada Lifespan Respite Care Coalition, and the Nevada Aging and Disability Services Division. She actually works at Aging and Disability Services with the Life Care Respite Grant Eye Care Program, and Riley Franco with AARP. We're really pleased to announce that our next event is going to be on July 19th at 1 p.m. And our topic is going to be powerful tools for caregivers taking care of you. Terry Maurer and Richard Davis from Dignity Health will help caregivers learn self-care tools to reduce stress, better manage emotions, and increase self-confidence. And they will also be sharing some local resources that may be helpful. So we look forward to that in July. All of our caregiver conversations take place on the third Monday of the month at 1 p.m. So we encourage you to mark your calendars so you can take advantage of these. We do record all our events and make the recording available to the public shortly after the live presentation. So everyone that's been on the call today will receive a follow-up email with information to access the recording and details about our next Conversations with Caregivers event. I know there was a handout that on today's presentation, and I hope Marcia will be able to get that on the, or Becky, one of you may be able to get that linked with the recording. I want to just thank everybody for your attendance today, and we look forward to seeing you in July. If you have any topics that you'd like to hear, please send us that information, because we're anxious to do topics that are relevant to caregivers. So share that information if that's what you're hearing out with the people you work with or your own family. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next month. Thanks for being with us.